I feel that I want to be quiet, that I want to absorb silence, that I want the silence of the sacred space to permeate my bones and permeate my cells and silence the noise, the talking inside of me. This is a familiar feeling when I am at Lourdes, and it is an exceptionally intense feeling when I am here at Betharram, which was established in 708. There's a quality to this silence that is different. It's not a speaking silence, it's an encouraging silence, it's a comforting silence. In the sadness of the way of the cross, there is grief, there is torment, there is torture, there is all of the unforgiveness and vindictiveness of humanity. But in the space, with the trees, with the beauty of the space, just the beauty of every way of the cross that is so distinct from another in a little chapel of its own, this beauty is inspiring and comforting and even empowering, because I think of this fact, this feeling that according to the Bible, Jesus Christ was crucified and has lived on in such a massive way, has become a teacher of the ages to the extent that our calendar marks the passing of time since he was present, teaching us to make not a burden of love. And that has been his message every step of the way. From the time I got onto the plane all the way through to being here at Lourdes, and Pascal has just left with Susan, there's been a celebration of the mother and the understanding that a mother's love doesn't undertake a burden in the having of children or in the nurturing of children, and that in return children remain unburdened by a mother's love. And yet we know from mothers all over the world that they suffer unduly because they have children. The way station after Jesus Christ meeting his mother is where Jesus consoles the women. And of course I had to smile because he says to me, he was very good with women. Women adored him. They adored his gentle nature. They adored his willingness to love, to heal, to acknowledge their value in the world. And he enjoys women in return. He enjoys their capriciousness. He enjoys their tempers. He enjoys the way they give instructions and the way they nurture, the way they bring up their children. He enjoys that they are willing and able to suffer for the well-being of others. And he very emphatically says, they make a burden of love. So make not a burden of love. There's always that. He's always coming back to that. And I wonder, how is it that we are doing that in our daily lives? And even as I wonder that, I don't want to go into thinking about it. I want to go into feeling it. And I want to feel the silence seep into my being and slowly dissipate all of those spaces inside of me where love has been burdensome, or where love remains burdensome, or where love is likely to become burdensome. I arrived at Lourdes with a feeling of homecoming. I have been showing it off to Susan with great pride, as if it is mine, as if I belong here. And more I feel that I will live here for at least some of the year and come home to Africa at least some of the year. And even in feeling that, I have to choose to think of this love that has come into my life as the adventure, as the expansion of myself, and not become burdened by it, to not consider the changes that love wrought, that love insists upon, that love imposes even as a burden. That I have to see that what it is doing is fashioning me. And it brings to mind the Songs of Innocence and Experience by William Blake, where he questions whether it is the same God who created the tiger that created the lamb. Is it the same God of the same temperament, of the same skill, of the same intention that created these two completely opposite beings? And when I say to Pascal, we're so very different. I'm allergic to mushrooms and he loves them. I speak English only and he speaks French. We live on opposite sides of the world. I show him all of these opposites. And he says these opposites are required that we may create completion. And when he says that, I hear an echo around me of wholeness. That this equinox is not just about coming into balance, but that ever since the new moon of 9/9 and Mars going direct, we are actively working at wholeness, at healing for wholeness, at clearing up our inner obstacles for wholeness. And that wholeness for each and every one of us means something different. You heard on Tuesday that for Oliver, wholeness is moving past the burden of grief, which is in fact the burden of love. I hear from other students that they have to move past the fear of being loved, the fear of being responsible for somebody else's care, for somebody else's feelings. And again, love has become a burden. I know that everybody is afraid of their own love and afraid to be vulnerable with it, afraid to get hurt because they love and are burdened by it. And so wholeness becomes a setting aside of the fear to live it anyway. We know only too well that our minds will grasp at fear, that it will cling to fear, that fear will create an excuse for any kind of agitation within ourselves, that fear will push the silence of our beings to the furthest corners, that we may think and do, behave as if we are part of the world. And I, the soul, knows that I am not part of this world, that I am visiting it, that I am passing through, that I am learning and teaching and learning, all in the name of love as I pass through. But our attachments to things and places and people, our attachment to needs and desires and accomplishments and achievements, all of these push the silence of our beings into nonsensical corners where they are never acknowledged. And I say nonsensical because it is so easy to think that this energetic world in which we are beings of electricity, beings of light, is in fact nonsense in the real world. It's fantastical for some, it's weird for others, it's unimaginable for more. And yet, for Jesus Christ, it was completely real. For the Buddha, it was completely real. For Einstein, it was completely real. Newton, completely real. Oshu, surreal, but completely real. These are all men of intelligence. And you'll notice that I'm only quoting the men, right? History has not recorded the women. History has been rather patriarchal in its approach to spirit. And all of that is changing too. Here at Lourdes, you see Mother Mary as a teacher, and how she teaches not by talking, but by being. And that when she does speak, it is her being that speaks first, that brings an impression to her words, that leaves an imprint on your mind and on your heart. So here there is that grace, that energy of Our Lady of Mercy that gives of itself all the time. In the silence, there is a cemetery, and the headstones are ancient. And when I look at them, I think of what lies beneath the headstone, beneath that beautiful tombstone that declares that someone was laid to rest here. And I know that there is very likely only a decomposing or already decomposed physical body there. That there is no person, no being at rest in this graveyard. And yet there is peace. There is quiet. There is even the balance of life and death. And I feel that I want to live that silence. That I want to be that silence. Not so that I can feel more or hear more or do more, but that in that silence itself there is a connectedness to everything. There is a oneness with everything. That the silence allows my auric field to expand and all of my chakras to resonate at a common frequency, and in turn to connect to the common frequency of the nature and the beauty of the silence around me. That the more silent I become, the more that oneness is established. It is a great pity that we have voice-guided meditations from these spaces, and I am obliged to talk, to do the energy transmission. I wish I could just stand here silently and let this feeling, let this grace flow directly from my heart to yours. Flow directly from my third eye to yours. And even as all of those chakras open up and start to send the energy, I can feel the knots inside of me unraveling. I can feel the fatigue from travel dissipating. I can feel myself getting more grounded. I can feel my pores start to open up as my skin starts to breathe fully. So as you're sitting there listening, breathe. I want to say as little as possible. And yet if I stop talking, you may think I've disappeared, that the connection has been cut, that I am no longer with you. I am not Jesus Christ, so I can't just pitch up and be a light in your heart. But he can. My mother's son seems to do that often. And he tells me that he does it with the grace of his mother. So in the silence of the sacred space, there is a constant acknowledgement of love. It is created from love. It is maintained by love. It is visited with love, admired with love. And even when people bring their grief here, they bring their love. He shows me that wherever there is a space that honors his mother, he is fully present. Whosoever honors my mother honors me, for it is in her mind and in her heart that I have become real. Whosoever is devoted to the well-being of my mother has my devotion. And he is particularly gracious and loving and uplifting in the face of any mother's suffering. One of the reasons I come to Lourdes is to pray for the women in this network who want to become mothers. Our Lady is the patron saint of the unborn, and she has intervened on 10 occasions already to ensure that a soul reaches the earth plane through her grace, that women are fulfilled in this sacred contract of motherhood, that they are fulfilled in the feeling of being women, being maternal in the world, and being acknowledged as mothers. And we know that we live in a world where if a woman isn't married or if she's married and doesn't have children, everybody wants to know why. And if you ask women, almost every one of them will tell you that one of the greatest learning curves of this lifetime, one of the most joyful celebrations of this lifetime, is the becoming a mother, which is one of the most meaningful roles women are called upon to play. And the raising of souls is no easy deed. It takes work, it takes commitment. Unlike the partnership relationship, the role of mother holds a very different devotion. Mothers are required to put their children first, and they live in fear of anything happening to their children. It is unnatural for their children to precede them into the spirit world. And so mothers generally are overburdened by love. Jesus Christ honors this. He honors that although this love is so burdensome, women continue to choose it. They continue to choose to have children long before they themselves are born. And of course, they are born as children to a mother. This continuity that we have doesn't seek to negate the men who help us make this possible, but this continuity from mother to son and mother to daughter, mothers as primary caregivers, mothers who take care of orphans after the 2 world wars, where men were killed and so many children were left orphaned. The women all over the world, especially here in Europe, gathered and created orphanages where one woman would mother 10 to 20 children in one home. I used to work for SOS Kinderdorf International, which was established here in Innsbruck in Austria. And they are now an international organization with children's homes in almost every part of the world. I built one myself in Pietermaritzburg because this is how women have maintained society, through nurturing, through loving. We have now reached a stage in human history where we must learn to be unburdened by love, unburdened by the nurturing that we are called upon to provide. And we become unburdened by it when we regard it not as an act of service, not as an act that is for another, but as a becoming of self, as a living of self. It is only when we attach love to something or someone else that it holds the energy of a burden. When we allow it to flow as naturally as possible, to be who we are, when love becomes you, it never burdens you. We talk about trusting in love, and we talk about having faith in it, as if it is separate from who we are and how we live. And for as long as it is separate from who we are and how we live, we are burdened by it. So when did we stop being naturally, organically, intuitively, intelligently, intentionally, creatively loving? Never mind why. Just stop for a moment and think, when did you stop? It's got nothing to do with anyone else. It's got nothing to do with somebody hurting you. It's got nothing to do with somebody destroying your faith and betraying you. It's got everything to do with a choice of our own free will. In accordance with divine will, we choose to be born. We choose to be somebody's child. We choose to make somebody a mother. And we choose to live. We choose to learn. All of this wonderful free will implemented. And in one split second, somebody does something that we judge as bad or awful, and we feel pain, and we stop living ourselves. There is never a good reason to stop living. Even death isn't a good enough reason to stop living. Nobody I know has stopped living because they've died. In fact, everybody I know has lived grandly, out loud, more and better because they died. No one has stopped loving because they died. So why would you stop here, where this is the greatest possible experience of actively being loving? This may be the only space where we practice being unburdened by love. The energy this equinox has been exceptionally high. I have felt it buffeting against me, pushing me hither and thither, as if I want to explode into a million stars and be flung out into the night sky simultaneously. And occasionally I feel like a volcano, where the fire in its depths wants to explode into the world, even as it digs in deeper and penetrates further into the earth. There is a feeling of the energy going in every possible direction simultaneously. And I understand there is no one particular focus of wholeness. There is no one particular focus of balance. It is only in the human mind that we focus in on one thing and neglect or forget about the rest. Here in the space of silence and in this journey of wholeness, I am reminded to do everything, to be everything, holistically, every direction, simultaneously. All of the chakras communicate in every direction simultaneously. It is only those who live in the duality who think of the chakras facing forward and backward and dealing with the present moment and the past, completely forgetting that they're talking to each other along the energetic spine, that they are spinning in a multi-dimensional, three-dimensional for the physical body, but multi-dimensional way for the spiritual body. We are multi-dimensional beings of light. So when we come into balance, when we work for wholeness, when we are dissipating the obstacles within us through silence, every little bit we do has a ripple effect. Every little bit goes a lot further than we can think it, or experience it, or see it. And it is the dimensions beyond us that encourage and inspire and support the wholeness we want to create here in the duality. My mother's son says, there is a well within you. Dig deep. Resuscitate yourself. And I see so clearly a deep well, as if there is water at the bottom of it. When I was at Rameshwaram with Charmaine, going to the temple there, they have these deep wells all over the city called Tirthams. And I remember trying to read my aura in the well. We are all deep wells. 2/3 of our body is water. Water that flows, water that holds information about who we are. Water that brings the life force to every part of our beings. And it is in the silences that we best accommodate our healing. It is in the silence that we are best able to create this room, the space inside of us, for our chakras to communicate with each other silently, to send frequencies to each other, to uplift each other. And what that means is that exactly as I am standing in a sacred space of silence that permeates my being and uplifts me, the chakras within me treat I, the soul, treat me as a sacred space. All of the chakras in the silence communicate with each other, lending each other their support, uplifting each other, allowing all of my auric field to become healed, completed, so that the lines, the flow of electricity from one chakra to the next, from one part of my physical body to the next, from one part of my auric field to the next, flows smoothly, in harmony, with ease. This is my life. How did I get so blessed? Let us meditate.